Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle. Jamie Eads joining you as I do each and every week. This is episode 109. Hope everybody's having a good week out there. Little piece of news that I want to share with you and give a shout out to some of my old dear friends out there in the drum forum world. Years and years ago, I became a member of a drum builders forum called Ghost Note. The web address is ghostnote.net. And that forum went away a few years ago, and I have sorely missed hanging out. And I've just made lifelong friends through that forum, some really good guys, and it is absolutely a laugh a minute over there. I'm very pleased to say that this week, Ghost Note has risen from the ashes. The forum is back up. So if you're up for seeing how some master craftsmen build drums and, silly stories about, bodily functions. I mean, just all kinds of nonsense goes on over there, but it really is a great community. So if you have the chance, head over to ghostnote.net, register, and join us for some really cool conversations over there. We've got a great episode for you today. I'm going to be joined by just a phenomenal drummer out of the Minneapolis area. I'm going to be joined by Noah Levy right after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com. Follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, guys and girls, as I mentioned, we're going to be joined by Noah Levy today. Noah is just a fantastic drummer. The last several years, he's been playing with the great Brian Setzer. He spent some time in the band Five for Fighting, and his main project, that he was in for many years is the Honey Dogs, which is a great band based out of Minneapolis. Noah's just a super guy, and I want to thank our old pal Dave Kirby for hooking me and Noah up and having this great conversation. It's a great hang. I laughed so much. Noah's just such a funny guy, and the whole interview is just full of great advice and tips for working drummers. So I know you're going to get a lot out of this. So please help me welcome to the Drum Shuffle, Noah Levy. Hey, good evening, Noah. How's it going, man?
Hey, Jamie. How are you?
Well, I can't complain too much. I understand you just got back from a nice and well-deserved vacation. How are things up in the great north of Minnesota?
Quiet, very quiet.
Yeah, man.
I need to feel some normalcy right now. So.
Yeah, man. We're, and I don't know how to quite put this, as we're recording this, I'm kind of in my summer break for the show, not publishing new episodes. So by the time your episode airs, it will be, a month or so from now when we're talking. And, right now, currently in the news, this whole pandemic just, it keeps getting worse and worse. If the pundits are correct. And it seems like we're never going to get back to playing shows ever again. So how are you filling your time right now?
As luck would have it, I've been building a studio for the past year. And my electrical went in the week of the quarantine. So, it's kind of been a blessing in the respect that I can just kind of hunker down and work here.
Yeah.
But, gig-wise, I've had the occasional, I've done a drive-in gig where you're playing to people in cars, which was surreal. But,
yeah.
That's about it, really.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to, a friend in Nashville and he made the point, he was like, we were kind of the first to close down and we're going to be the last to go back,
Yeah.
So,
I hope people have outlets, I'm worried about all the crew folks that I travel with. Musicians can kind of find side hustles, but the crew folks need some help.
Yeah. And there's just, countless stories about, lighting techs or monitor engineers or whatever the case may be that are, picking up landscaping gigs or, driving Uber or whatever, man. Those folks are really hurting. And, I'll take this opportunity to give a shout out to Music Cares, which is part of the Recording Academy. They've got a great thing going, so if anybody out there listening, if you can throw a 20 spot towards Music Cares, they are trying to help those folks in the industry. So,
yeah, they do great work. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think it's also people just trying to stay engaged, trying to stay in touch with people and trying to play music together right now. It's our sanity, right? It's our lifeblood.
Yeah. So. I've been doing some sessions, which is cool, going into the studio, but it's really weird. I've always played in situations where there was at least some element of live cutting on the floor, right? Like playing with a bass player or a guitarist or whatever. In the sessions that I've done since all this started, it's, you go in and play to a click and then, a few weeks later you hear, how it turned out, which is, it's an adjustment for me anyway.
Oh, no doubt. Well, I do a lot of that work here because, people send me their guitar and vocals with a click, but I always have to ask, is this guitar going to be recut? Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because the fills you do, sometimes you want to lean forward. If you fall too far off the back of it, it'll sound really strange. So, whereas if you're in a room with people, you're all reading each other and reacting. So
there's a huge part of that. Well, we digress here at the very beginning of your episode, but so as is the tradition here on the show, you're a Minnesota native, if I'm understanding correctly, but walk us through you getting your start in music and how you got into drumming to begin with, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I can point directly to my brother, who's 8 years older than me. He had a cardboard Beatles band he started where he was, miming the guitar, and he needed a drummer, so he put his little 5-year-old brother in front of a cardboard Ludwig kit with markers in my hands.
Nice. That's perfect.
And it kind of, he realized I could keep the beat right away, and And then he started playing real guitar, and I started playing real drums, or actually pots and pans. But
yeah. Well,
and then
was mom and dad okay with your choice of instrument? I mean, that's always a real issue.
Not at all. My father was just kind of mystified by it. My mom she'd let me play when they weren't in the house. She just hated the sound of the drums.
Of course.
But they were both like, "How are my sons musicians? I don't get it." But
that's awesome. So now, is your brother still involved in the industry at all?
Yeah, he and we still play together a lot. We had a band called the Honey Dogs for many years, and toured extensively, and I did that for maybe 10 years. Spent my 20s in a van with him.
Oh, that's good times right there.
Yes, although now, the brother thing. We can play covers together. We can't play originals. Although,
yeah.
I've just been recording his originals with him again. So
nice.
But yeah, it's complicated.
So, now the Honey Dogs, you guys put out quite a few records too. I mean, I want to say there was like 4 or 5 different records that you guys put out in the day. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I was on about 5 with them. And then they continued on with another drummer, Peter Anderson, who's great.
Okay. Cool.
But I left to kind of... Actually, I left when my son was born. I wanted to get off the road for a bit. And then I just started freelancing with other people. That's when I started kind of touring with other folks.
Yeah, I got you. Well, so kind of going backwards a little bit here, because we I have a tendency to go down every rabbit hole I see, so I apologize for that. But, but back in your early days, you and your brother, was it you two kind of forming your garage bands and that's what stuck?
No, what happened was, he's so much older than me, that I was playing a lot with friends my own age. And then I started playing, when I was in high school, I started playing in clubs, or like junior high. And my brother started bringing me in around then.
Okay.
With different projects, and we would end up in different bands. We had a band called the Picadors for a long time that I brought him into. And that was kind of the first band where you're making records and you're touring a little bit, and then played with some different people, and then we started the Honey Dogs, and that kind of took off around here.
Yeah, well, and you guys have such a great scene up there, and it's been that way for a long time. I mean, everybody immediately thinks of Prince, right? In kind of that Minneapolis scene, but there was so much good music coming out of your area, especially, late 80s, early 90s, Soul Asylum, the Jayhawks. I mean, just all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, Replacements. And I'm, to this day, the level of talent in this town just blows me away. I keep I'll be on a session. Where'd you come from? I don't know where all these people come from. But yeah, there's all those bands where, the Replacements were like our Stones, if you're my age. And I was a huge Prince fanatic, especially Sign of the Times era.
Yeah.
And all the offshoots, Time,
Yeah. Yeah, just so much talent in that area. So, I mean, I read somewhere that you're self-taught. So, I'm guessing that means that you had a whole lot of competition, growing up in that scene.
Yeah, the scene here, it's strange. It's almost split in half. There was like the punk rock players that it was cool not to be good. And then there was like the Prince players where it's, if you come, you're going to come correct.
Right. Yeah.
And the jazz scene. And I kind of had a foot in both worlds. You know, I'd go see the Replacements and they'd be too drunk to play. And then the next time you'd see them, they'd be brilliant. But, I was kind of I came up in like the punk rock world a little bit and started refining it as I got older. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So, but there's I think that's fading a bit now, but there was a little bit of, it's cool not to be good at your instrument for a while, you know?
Sign of the times, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of went through that here. I mean, obviously we've never had a huge music scene in central Kentucky. I mean, there's a lot of talent here, don't get me wrong, but it's not like, Austin or Minneapolis or, certainly Nashville or LA, or Phoenix, but there's a lot of talent here. And I think that all scenes go through those waves of, we don't care. We don't read our press. You know what I mean? And then,
right.
Then it kind of comes back around to, I'm the educated cat that can go into any session and read charts. There's
right.
both worlds, Yep.
So, and the older I get, I know when I was getting out of high school, it was, you should go to music school. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. It'll change the way I play. I didn't even know what I didn't know at the time,
Yeah.
It was, I know so many, there's a million great players that come out of these schools. It's just being young and cocky.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I've had, I can't count, on all my digits, how many Berkeley grads we've had on the show. And, it's just, I think there's not a wrong way to do it. I come from your school, in my own playing in that, I've never really had any formal training, and that's been okay for me. But the guys that don't have the formal training always say, I wish I'd got, more formal training. And then you have some guys that graduated from Berkeley that was like, I would have much rather, been playing in garage bands and riding around in a van than spending 4 years in Boston. Right. I mean,
sure. But the reason I feel like it would have been good is, just when I get on sessions with these guys, man, men or women, they come correct. They've been put through their paces.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it since they were very young. So
yeah, but the more of those you do, the more things you pick up.
Sure.
It's taken me 20 years to learn the lingo of just what those guys are talking about in the session, right? And,
sure.
But once you pick up on it, it becomes a little bit easier, I think.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So. And
I do also hear that from Berkeley players too, like go for a year,
yeah.
and then drop out, get a gig, get out of there. So,
yeah.
Heard that one too.
Well, you'll be a lot richer if you drop out after a year. That's for sure.
Oh, certainly.
It is not a cheap place to go. So, you guys had some success with the Honey Dogs, and, I don't want to steal any of your thunder, but you've got, a very impressive resume. And obviously you've spent the last several years with Brian Setzer and the Brian Setzer Orchestra. But, one of the projects that I wanted to specifically ask about is the BoDeans. Now, they rolled through town here. I don't know. It's been a couple of years ago. They did a gig here and they had, the man, Kenny Aronoff, playing drums with them that night. So what's it like playing with a group who's, I guess, the regular guy is Kenny Aronoff? Is that intimidating at all?
It wasn't intimidating. It was just, man, I had to, the hardest part was just having to hit that hard. And I'm a pretty hard hitter.
Yeah.
But those guys, the songs are quite long. And Kurt, when Kurt the singer's foot starts to move, he wants you to hit hard, He's got this body language. And so just kind of the physicality that Kenny brings to a gig, you know, they want to feel you moving air with the BoDeans. And that was kind of, I wasn't intimidated by him. You know, he's a phenomenal drummer.
Yeah.
And I was never going to be him. We're different players, but I did have to bring that energy.
Yeah, well,
that he has.
Yeah, well, he's just a ball of energy. I mean, that guy doesn't have an off switch, I don't think.
We did a live record together.
Really? Okay, cool.
Yeah, he was very gracious. You know, I mean, I've always looked up to him. You know, since I was a kid, those Mellencamp records. You know, and I've stolen many fills from him over the years. But he was very gracious. I gave him a big hug. He's like, "Hey, you got a real Jewish thing going, kid. You look like Simon Phillips."
That's so funny. Of course, that's what Kenny said. But
but it was so we were on a click, and one would kind of do more percussion-y type stuff, and one would play the kit, and we'd alternate songs. I mean, we were both on kits, but one would just do like more backbeat stuff.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I'll have to check that out. I wasn't aware that you know that existed until just now, so I'll definitely have to check that out. So, as your career, you know, was progressing, you know, when you said you took some time off at the birth of your son, you know, from the Honey Dogs, and you kind of started freelancing. Talk to me a little bit about that process. You know, when you start throwing your name out there as, "Hey, I'm available," you know, what were some of the first things that came along?
Well, let's see here. Thinking back, I was touring with this guy, Mason Jennings, for a while. And, you know, as you tour, you meet different people. And I was out in Los Angeles doing a record for somebody, and I met the bass player from Five for Fighting.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He just kind of dropped in on the session, and we hit it off right away. And they said, "Well, come on out and you'll audition for this." Actually, I'll go back. The way my name got out a little bit was I had played with this band Golden Smog, which was Gary Lewis from the Jayhawks and Dan Murphy from Soul Asylum and Jeff Tweedy from Wilco. And it was like this kind of, you know, everybody doing their solo project. I don't want to use the word super group, like a stupor group, they called it.
Well, that is a super group. I mean, you just throwing those names out there, that's some pretty heavy weight in the Americana world anyway.
Yeah, so that was a gig that, you know, I was like 23 at the time, and they were all a little older, and you know, I was starstruck and had a great time doing it, but it kind of, I hate to say it, but sometimes like you'll have a gig that will legitimize you in other people's eyes. You're not a better player than you were the day before, but suddenly people think that you are, you know?
Well, it's resume building, you know, is what I refer to it. You know, if you tour with Prince, you're a hot commodity after that, right? I mean, same kind of thing.
Yeah. So I did that, and then calls started coming in a little bit, and you know, suddenly you're legitimized. And I was out in L.A. doing a record for my friend John Fields, and the bass player from Five for Fighting was hanging out, and so they had me come audition, kind of a cattle call thing, and I ended up getting the gig. And that was another one where suddenly you're doing television, and you know, people kind of see you a little more.
Yeah. Now, was this around the time that those guys just exploded, you know, right after 9/11 and all that stuff?
It was the record after that. They had a song called 100 Years.
Okay.
We were doing all the TV shows.
Okay.
And it was fun. Really good band. And did that for about a year. And then I went on to the BoDeans after that for about 6 years.
Okay. Yeah. Which is a great move, obviously. But can we explore something here just a second with Five for Fighting, doing the TV shows? I always find it interesting, when bands go on, Good Morning America or, whatever it is, Jay Leno, or I guess on Leno you're actually playing. But when you do those kind of morning TV shows, a lot of people don't realize that you're using, manhole covers for cymbals that really don't make a lot of noise. And, you've got, mesh heads on the kit. Is that weird to you? I mean, I've never experienced it, so I'm curious.
The only time that happened to me, the only time I had to lip sync was at the Daytona 500 with them. It was the craziest thing. So it was Five for Fighting. All the singers were singing. I should clarify. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here. But all the singers were singing live. It was Brian Wilson, Clint Black, and Five for Fighting, and we were all on these flatbed trucks at the beginning of the race. You got the people with the flags out front, and so Brian Wilson did Good Vibrations, Clint Black did his song, and we did 100 Years. But all the drummers, we had the cardboard on the drums, and we were all trying to crack each other up by doing the worst fills, like completely out of time fills, and see what we could get away with. But my big fill in the song, coming out into the last chorus, all of a sudden the cardboard came up and hit me in the face. And I'm sure nobody could tell, but I was mortified.
Well, I've heard stories from other guys that were like, we did, I don't know, Dateline NB. I don't know what but they're doing some crazy morning show somewhere, Regis and Kathy Lee or something. I don't know.
Right.
But they were like, we're not playing, it's basically, the MP3 playing and we're all lip syncing and, you've got, fake cymbals, fake drum heads, the whole 9 yards, and just, it's insanity.
Yeah. We never had to do that. Although, maybe that's a track thing too. We didn't really have many tracks or any tracks on that gig.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah.
You like to hear about people that actually play, right? When you pay that concert ticket freight, you like to know that the guys are really playing tonight.
Oh man, yeah.
So, well, so after Five for Fighting, you go and do the BoDeans gig for several years, as you stated. And is that the gig that kind of led into the BSO, or I saw that you have a Mandy Moore credit as well?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. I never met her, but my son was actually in the hospital. He had just been born, and my friend John Fields was producing her. So I snuck out for a day and cut a couple songs for her record of covers she did.
Okay. All right. But so you never met her, actually?
Never met her.
Well, there are those gigs too, kids. That's interesting. So at what point did Brian Setzer come onto your radar?
Well, I was at parent-teacher conferences for my son, and I got a call from a producer saying, "Hey, I got Brian Setzer coming down to record tonight. He needs a drummer. You want to come down?" I'm like, "Absolutely."
Yes.
That was the Stray Cats were my first concert.
Really?
Yeah, I learned how to play drums to those records.
Really?
So,
oh wow.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So this is getting good. Please continue.
Yeah, so I was 12 years old. My mom dropped this friend of mine and I off at Northrop Auditorium and blew my mind. That album, Built for Speed, was just huge in my house.
Yeah.
So I get the call to go record with him, and I walk in, and he was just kind of messing around playing the vibes. And he had his pump up. He looked like Brian Setzer. And he was a really sweet guy. I liked him immediately. And they played me the song. I went in and I hit it, and I got it on the first take. And Brian runs out. He's like, "Where you been all my life? Do you read?"
Oh, wow.
And I said, I don't, but I can learn. He said, don't worry about it. So it was supposed to be demos, and it was for the orchestra. But it was just, we were cutting as like the rhythm section. And then they called me back the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And then they decided, well, this is going to be the record, actually.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, so I was really happy about that, and didn't hear from them because he already had his touring drummer for the orchestra. And so about a half a year later, maybe a year later, they called and said they're going to do a rockabilly tour in Europe, and would I like to do it? And I said, absolutely, and kind of been with him ever since.
Yeah, man, well, I mean, you know, dare I say, that's got to be kind of a dreamy gig. I mean, if the Stray Cats were, you know, your first concert, I mean, obviously the guy is just an amazing player. I mean, he can play anything. But, you know, I mean, talk to me a little bit about, you know, just the surreality of it. I mean, it's got to be, you know, do you pinch yourself every night?
You know what? It sounds corny, but every night when he does the opening chords to Rock This Town, the hairs on my arm stand up.
Of course.
You know, it's just, and your adrenaline goes. But the thing about Brian, he's the kind of performer that, you know, sometimes when somebody looks at you, it's, what are you doing? You know, like some people play mad. When he looks at you, it's fuck yeah. You know, he's very in the moment. And so when you play with him, it's like getting shot out of a cannon every night. It's so intense. And then I ended up playing with the big band later, which is a whole other story, a whole other discipline too.
Well, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, look, you know, people would fire cannons at me if I tried to play with a big band. You know what I mean? It's like, that's just not something that's in my personal lexicon. So, I mean, I would imagine it took a little bit of woodshedding to get ready for that.
Oh my God. Well, and you know, as a non-reader, I mean, I can read very basic, but these charts, they're very in depth. So I had to memorize everything.
So not an easy game.
And not an easy task. And I think the reason it worked with Brian is it's a feel. It's you know, I can hit the hits, I can do all that stuff, but we just feel it in the same place, and we can swing together, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, like Bernie Dressel can play circles around me. I'm just going to come right out and say it. The guy is like fucking Buddy Rich, you know?
Yeah.
But I feel like I can quarterback the band well, you know?
And that's a super important skill. You know, I mean, there are countless examples of, you know, I would rather have a guy that can quarterback, as you put it, you know, that can just get us through an arrangement, get us through a song, than somebody that can, you know, just play circles around every other drummer. I think that's a much needed skill set in some instances.
Yeah. Well, and that's not to say he wasn't a great quarterback too, but I just feel like it's a groove thing on top of it, you know?
Yeah.
And it just works. It fits, I think.
Yeah, well, and I think that there's, you know, you've been playing with Brian for quite some time now. There's a certain telepathy that develops when you're in a musical situation for, you know, a number of months or years that, you know, sometimes you're just on the same wavelength with a guy, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and reading body language. I mean, now, after you get a little bit older, when you get a new gig, you think, I just want to be 2 years into this, right? I just long to, because, at that point, well, actually, or 2 weeks into a tour, they know that a mistake is out of character, or I understand if they lift their leg like this, or their hand does that, or I can tell if they're tense, or,
Yeah.
You as a drummer, we have to read body language a lot.
Yeah. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, and you were talking about, reading the foot of, in the BoDeans gig, there's so many of those little signals that 99.8% of the population never realizes. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and also every front person has very different expectations. And learning that is so important. And sometimes it presents itself and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
For a while.
Yeah. Well, that's true too. I mean, but you made, I laughed, I cackled, but you said, I just want to be 2 years into this or 2 weeks into the tour. And that's a really good point. As I get older, I certainly don't want to speak for you, but any kind of new situation that I'm in, I want the growing pains out of the way instantly.
Yep.
You don't want to go through that process again with with another group of musicians. So how do we as drummers overcome that?
I don't know that you can. I think you can sublimate it. I think some people are really good at not letting it show. And that's another thing I like about being a little older is you care a little less, and you kind of understand that this will get better.
Yeah.
But the drum position is such an interesting spot because people have to trust you. I don't know if you've ever worked with somebody where maybe the first set or the first couple gigs, they aren't letting you lead the way a little bit.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And once they get confidence in you, it completely changes. And I've had that happen from time to time.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine, obviously, you're playing at such a much higher level than most of us ever get to do. I was just kind of curious as to, how you overcome some of those hurdles, because I would imagine you've been in a gig before where you were like, man, this doesn't feel good at all right now.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to think. I've had the occasional gig where, usually my first thought, maybe it's the drummer's ego, but it's like, oh, this feels good. They just don't know it yet. you know what I mean?
Yes,
you have to have a little bit of that. And it sounds horrible. It sounds cocky, but, and sometimes you're just not the right fit. I've made the mistake. I had a tour with somebody that they thought they were hiring a different drummer, basically. They wanted the last drummer.
I see.
And I pride myself on being flexible, but I was just the wrong guy for it.
Yeah.
And the other drummer wanted the gig back, and they got the gig back,
Yeah.
So, but usually, that one was hard because I tried to change how I played to the point of losing myself. And that can happen. I've seen, sometimes you'll go to a show and you go, that's a really good player. They just don't look comfortable. I don't know, is the band leader psyching them out? Are they, because sometimes it just doesn't make sense. But more and more I see that sometimes there's just dysfunctional situations.
Yeah.
As a player. But you have to have a certain amount of confidence that I'm going to make this better. And that's how I've worked through it.
Yeah. I mean, you bring up a good point, and I'll give, a brief example. I actually caught the Black Crowes probably circa 2004, 2005, something like that. And it was while Steve Gorman was not in the band. They were working in a new guy, and I think his name was Bill Bailey, if my memory serves me correct. But, every song, one of the Robinson brothers walked back and gave him instruction on how to play the song. And it was exact opposite advice on how they wanted it. So that poor guy was in a situation of, which master do I serve right now? And you could just tell that life sucked for him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a tough one. And I've also dealt with some people that only respect the fuck you.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like it's like they're screaming at you to just tell them to fuck off, and then they'll respect you.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen very often. I don't like being in that position, but sometimes it happens. But that's unbelievable. And you're also stuck between two brothers that probably have, they're both very large personalities. I don't know them. I shouldn't conjecture, but yeah, I mean, I've been there where the BoDeans, there were two front people, and I had to get used to one would tell me one thing and one would tell me the other. And that was a learning curve.
Yeah.
And I think I found a spot for it. But yeah, that drummer, that's a tough one. And that Black Crowes drummer is probably embarrassed, and that's a tough one.
Again, to 99.9% of the people in the audience that night, it was like, I'm seeing the Black Crowes, they sound good, right? You know what I'm saying? But me, as what I consider to be a semi-professional musician, I pointed it out to my wife. I was like, man, at 1 second, Chris is railing on this guy to speed up or do, whatever. And then Rich turns around and tells him to slow down or whatever, and I was like, man, this poor guy is catching hell through the whole 90-minute set. And you could just see the look on his face of, what the fuck do you want me to do, guys? You know what I mean? It was just, I felt bad for him.
I had a gig, I won't mention the name, but, and it was a song that everybody going to the concert had heard. And the singer says to me, this isn't Setzer, by the way, but the singer says to me, I need you to slow it down at the chorus. Like, you want me to lay back on the beat? No, I want the chorus to slow down.
Okay.
And every bone in my body was telling me not to do it. And it was horrible. You'd get ready for the chorus. All of a sudden, just a little part of me died every night when I did that. But and it didn't sound good. It really didn't. But sometimes people just want you to be who you aren't. And you have to be flexible. It's not about me, but
right, obviously. But I mean, I've been in situations, and you can speak to this probably a lot more eloquently than I can. But like with Brian Setzer, he's played with a lot of drummers before Noah, right? I mean, so I'm assuming he has said, "Hey, man, do your thing." I don't suspect he told you to learn every record note for note and play it just like that. But at the same time, like you said, rock this town. There's 4,000 air drummers in in the audience, right? You gotta stay true to the original to a certain point. How do you deal with that?
That's a good point. People, they want to hear that, what in the chorus.
Right.
If you don't do that, it's like, you have to think about what was a big part of the song. You might editorialize around the edges, but I think that's a good point. Dance with the one that brought you, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody wants to put their mark on every gig, and you brought up a really good point of I've changed my playing in some situations to the point that I was, I almost lost me. We talk so much to young players about develop your voice, develop your sound, develop your thing. And then you catch a gig, right? You get up on stage and somebody says, don't do you, do, I don't know, Tommy Lee, don't do you, do Artemis Pyle, whatever the case may be. That's a huge dichotomy for most people.
Yeah. And I think there's ways of doing it. If you were to play Artemis Pyle or you were to play Tommy Lee, it would still sound like you.
Yeah.
It's just kind of the degree to which you do it, and is your body comfortable? Are you, because flexibility is kind of the name of the game as a side person, the gig isn't about you, it's about making the gig better. So, but occasionally, it's just an unwinnable situation. Like that drummer from the Black Crowes, they were doomed.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it was off the rails bad.
Yeah. And I'm sure they were a good drummer, and it's just, you're just doomed. And, the mistake I made on that gig was, changing too much. And, it was lesson learned, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you pack that away and remember it next time, I guess, is really the only thing you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. These things are great learning experiences, and hopefully you get a chance to use it next time, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the cool thing about the drum community. And, I kick this dead horse on this show all the time, but there is such a fraternity amongst drummers, right? In that every drummer I go see, I'm stealing something from that guy or girl. There's going to be something that works its way into my lexicon. And, it's, we can't all be right for every gig. You know what I mean? You can make yourself better for every gig, but, I don't know that anybody's going to hire me to do like a hardcore straight ahead jazz gig. That's just not, it's not something I'm going to be comfortable pulling off. And it's
you and me both.
Yeah. It's just not going to be good. Right.
No.
And likewise, I'm not going to be the next drummer of, I don't know, Iron Maiden or Slayer, because that's not something I do well. Right.
Right.
So once you find what lane you fit into, doesn't mean you always have to stay in that lane, but it means that's your comfort zone. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in my mind, I would like to think that I could jump in and do all these things, but I work at jazz drumming, but I'm just not great at floating. My body wants a backbeat.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Same.
I'm a little too heavy at it, but I think people just figure that out. And I know people that are like very athletic and they're great, like, like thrash metal drummers, and it's like a different discipline.
Yeah.
It's a different place. You feel it in your body, it's very different.
Yeah.
Thing that I'm used to. For me, it's like Charlie Watts or John Bonham or Jim Keltner, like that kind of, it's a role,
Yeah, well, and you bring up a good point. We haven't talked about your influences, but, you just mentioned three of the all-time greats, in my opinion. Those are three guys that I would point to as role models for me as a player. Who are some of the big influences for you?
Well, obviously Ringo was, because that was the first music I imprinted on. Ringo was a big one. John Bonham, I just adore. I just love John Bonham. I love his pocket. I love the sound of his drums. I love his parts, Charlie, I love. He's all over the place, but I just love that, mid-period Stone stuff.
Yeah.
And Keltner, that was a big eye-opener for me when Bring the Family came out by John Hyatt.
Yeah.
I didn't know Keltner was on all these records that I'd listened to growing up. And then I went back and discovered him on all the Ry Cooder stuff and George Harrison and whatever. But that was a big eye-opener.
Well, he was the guy that I learned behind the beat. He was the example that everybody gave to me of when somebody would say, hey, play this behind the beat. I didn't know what that meant as, a 15-year-old kid or 16-year-old kid. And everybody was like, listen to some Keltner.
And yeah, that's in Technicolor right there, isn't it? Like,
yes.
That's way behind the beat.
Yeah. So that was the example that was given to me by the older musicians that understood. They were like, you need to listen to some Keltner. You'll understand behind the beat.
Yeah. Yeah. And, Zig Modalist from the Meters
sure.
and all the James Brown drummers. And I was, big R&B head.
That's awesome, man. Well, part of that may be geography too. You're up there in Minnesota, obviously, but
yeah.
I would imagine Motown, it really permeated your childhood.
Yeah, I came to R&B in a weird way. I was a big Hendrix fan, and that was kind of my gateway to Prince. Growing up here, it was like, I hate Prince, and then by the time I hit high school, I was just completely enamored of him. And then that, James Brown and the Motown stuff is just, it's everywhere. It's like water,
Yeah.
Growing up, you just hear it everywhere. And that just kind of, it's in your marrow after a while, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think it's so interesting that we can all come from, different societies, different, regions of the country, different, socioeconomic things. But as musicians, we all have like this common, or a set of common denominators. Like everybody can point to, hey, this is the thing that shaped me. And so many guys say Ringo, Bonham, and Watts. Right. I mean, and I just think that's, I don't know. I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. And you kind of talk about the fellowship too among players. And when we get together, it's a common language we have, and it's a beautiful thing that bonds us, I think.
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's been conversations, post-gig conversations that I've had where somebody will be like, oh my God, I can't stand John Bonham. And it's like, well, that guy's an asshole,
Yeah, I get really, I have to admit, I get really pissed off when people say Ringo can't play. It's, listen, that guy's groove. Yeah, he doesn't have Bill Bruford's chops, but I don't want to hear Bill Bruford in the Beatles,
Yeah. Nobody, Charlie Watts, Ringo Starr, guys that play the song. I mean, who else would you point to besides one of those two guys? They were the perfect guys for their gig.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Keith Richards attributes the Stone sound to Charlie Watts.
I can't disagree with him on that one. Yeah. It's all good stuff. Well, listen, Noah, I mean, this has been just a fantastic conversation. I want to be respectful of your time. So let's kind of transition just a bit. Obviously, you mentioned the word sideman earlier. You've been playing with Brian for quite some time. Do you have any kind of, passion projects or solo work that we should be looking forward to? You mentioned a new studio, so I'm going to put two and two together here.
Yeah, that is mostly just people's songs. Somebody will send me a song in the morning and I'll have it done in the afternoon. Any stuff coming out? I'm trying to think. Well, I've been recording with my brother Adam, so that should probably be out sometime in the next year.
Okay.
But it's just been a lot of random stuff here.
Okay.
So
now, do you obviously you're doing some remote tracks for folks? Do you teach at all?
I'm a lousy teacher. When people ask me if I'll give them a lesson, I say, well, just come on over. We'll listen to some Stevie Wonder records or something. And we can talk about, how the drums are reacting to the bass, or why did they choose this, or let's just geek out on a record for a while. That's where I feel like I could give them something of value. There's a lot of people that could teach somebody a lot quicker than I could.
Yeah, same. But I think that's a huge service, to your fellow drummers, is to say, hey, listen to this. Here's why he did that.
Right.
That's part of the playing vocabulary that, if nobody's ever pointed it out to you, you might stumble upon that fact of your own accord. But when somebody can point it out to you, I think it sinks in a little deeper.
Yeah, and sitting around and talking about stuff like this, to me, is very valuable. It's I love to hear from other drummers, their experience on the job and what's going through their mind, and I'm thinking about it as I'm playing.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, that's a great point. Well, as is our tradition, when we get ready to wrap up, I think the whole interview has been full of great advice for other players, but I'm going to put you on the spot here. Over your career, which has obviously been very successful, if you can boil it down to a good piece of advice for everybody to take out in their day-to-day lives, what would that be?
I would say respect the song, that's a good question. Don't be a dick.
That's important.
It's so important that people want to be with you, and that you're generous of spirit when you're playing. No matter what the gig is, always take everybody's abilities and feelings into account. It's so important. I got a good piece of advice a long time ago. A friend of mine said, "Don't work for money and don't work for free."
Oh, yeah. That's a really good point. And, if you want to elaborate on that, the floor is yours, but man, that's a good one.
Yeah. It's fairly self-explanatory. You're going to have to work for a little less than you're worth sometimes, but, in the end, it pays off in a very big way.
That's very true. Well, listen, my friend, you are, this has been a great drummer hang, in my opinion. You are welcome on this program anytime. So,
thanks, Jamie. Really nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure, man. We'll have to have you back. We'll catch up, see what's going on. Hopefully, my running joke now is when the end of the world is over and we all get back to, to some gigs and playing, come back and tell us how everything's been going, man.
I'd love to.
All right. Awesome. Well, listen, have a great evening. Thank you so much. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
All right. See you. All right, guys and girls, that is going to wrap up episode 109 of the Drum Shuffle. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. It helps us more than you'll ever know that you listen. It helps the show continue to grow. The biggest thing you can do for us, we don't ask for money, but we do ask you to share a link with a friend. It helps us tremendously. I can't say that enough. We sincerely appreciate all your efforts sharing our podcast with your friends. As always, we answer every single email we get over here at the Drum Shuffle. The email address is thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. Our web address is thedrumshuffle.com. And of course, you can find more information about me over at jamieeads.com. Just a quick reminder, head over to ghostnote.net, register, join in on the fun. It's a great community of drummers, a lot to be learned over there. So please join me over there. I'm on quite often, so I'll look for you there. Hey, hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you choose to listen to the Drum Shuffle on. We have a lot of great guests coming up. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Mark Pizzapia. Mark is just a phenomenal drummer who lives down in Nashville. Tons of work. He's played with just all kinds of great folks. It's a great episode. The week after that, I'm going to be joined by the dude, Harry Myrie. If you don't know who Harry is, get hip quick. What a fantastic conversation I had with Harry. And in 3 weeks' time, I will be joined by the legendary Danny Gottlieb. We've got a lot of great guests coming up, and you're not going to want to miss those. So hit that subscribe button. Again, thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in. We sincerely appreciate it. So until next time, may your heads stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.